Stop right there. This area is for speakers and staff only." The voice cut across the marble lobby like a blade. Security guard Greg Lindell stepped sideways, planting himself between the woman and the double doors that led backstage. His hand hovered near his belt. His chest was already puffed out before she'd said a single word. The woman stopped. She was holding a leather portfolio against her chest, a lanyard around her neck, dressed in a charcoal blazer that fit like it had been made for her. She looked at him calmly. "I'm aware," she said. "I'm speaking this morning." Greg let out a short laugh through his nose. He looked her up and down, the dark skin, the natural hair pulled back, the quiet way she stood, and whatever calculation ran behind his eyes. It landed exactly where it always landed. "Sure you are," he said. "Look, the catering entrance is around the side. You can't be back here. This is for the keynote and the VIPs. I am the keynote. Ma'am." He said the word like a wall coming down. "I'm going to need you to step back from the door." She didn't step back. She reached up slowly with her hands visible the entire time and lifted the lanyard so he could see the badge hanging from it. Her name, her photo, the word printed in bold red letters underneath, "Speaker." Greg didn't read it. He didn't even look at it. He snatched it, the whole lanyard, pulled it up over her head in one motion, glanced at it for half a second, and dropped it on the floor between them. "Anybody can print one of these," he said. "I've seen people do it. You want to get into this event, you go to the registration desk like everybody else, and you wait." The lanyard lay on the cold marble. She looked down at it. She did not pick it up, not yet. A man in a navy suit walked past, slowed, glanced at the scene, and gave Greg a small nod, the kind that says, "Good, keep them in line," before continuing toward the coffee station. A young woman near the wall lifted her phone and started filming, a half smile on her face, not stepping in, just recording. And an older gentleman in a conference badge hurried past with his eyes fixed on the carpet, pretending he'd seen nothing at all, walking faster than he needed to. Greg crossed his arms. He was enjoying this now. You could see it in his shoulders. He had no idea. Because the woman he had just stopped from entering, the woman whose credentials he'd thrown on the floor, was about to walk onto that stage in front of 2,000 people and 400,000 more watching the live stream. She was the reason this entire conference existed this year. The organizers had flown her in first class. Her name was on the banner hanging 40 feet above his head, the one he passed every morning and never read. And in 18 minutes, when the lights went up and the host called her name and she did not appear, this man's career, 11 years of it, was going to end in the most public way a career can end. He just didn't know it yet. But this story doesn't start here. Rewind. Her name is Dr. Adaize Okonkwo. She is 46 years old. For the past 19 years, she has been one of the most cited researchers in the field of organizational ethics. And for the last 6, she has served as the founding director of the Center for Institutional Accountability at one of the most respected universities in the country. She has advised 3 federal agencies. She has testified before Congress twice. The keynote she was about to deliver, the one Greg was blocking her from giving, was titled, "The Cost of the Snap Judgment: How Bias Operates in the Spaces We Don't Examine." She did not come from money. Her father, Emeka, came to this country with 2 suitcases and an engineering degree that no employer would honor. He spent 26 years working the overnight shift at a parts warehouse, lifting boxes with hands that had once drawn bridges. He never complained. Every evening before his shift, he would sit at the kitchen table and read to her. not children's books, but the newspaper, the editorial page, asking her what she thought, listening to her answer like it was the most important opinion in the world. He died 4 years ago. In the breast pocket of the charcoal blazer she was wearing that morning, folded into a small square, was the last letter he ever wrote her. The handwriting was shaky by then. It said only one thing she ever read aloud to anyone. "They will try to make you small. Do not help them." That morning, she had not wanted anything extraordinary. She had landed the night before, slept badly in the hotel, and come down early because she liked to stand on an empty stage before a talk and feel the size of the room. That was all she wanted. To walk onto the stage early, alone, and breathe. She was not looking for a confrontation. She was looking for a quiet 10 minutes before 2,000 people arrived. Now let's talk about Greg Lindell. Greg was not a man the system had failed. He was a man the system had rewarded. 11 years with the private security firm that staffed the convention center. Employee of the quarter twice. His supervisor liked him because he was proactive. His file was full of glowing notes about his attention to detail and his commitment to protocol. It was also full of something else, if anyone had cared to read the whole thing. 9 complaints over 11 years. A black vendor stopped 4 times in one day. A Latino electrician made to produce his work order 3 separate times, while white contractors walked past unquestioned. A teenage girl in a hijab followed through the building by Greg until she left in tears. Every complaint reviewed by the same regional manager. Every complaint closed with the same 2 words: no violation. The manager was the one who had hired Greg in the first place, and he was not in the habit of admitting he'd hired wrong. So Greg had learned the lesson the system taught him. He had learned that his judgment was protocol, that stopping the right kind of person was diligence, that no one would ever make him answer for it. 11 years of evidence had taught him he was untouchable. 11 years of evidence was about to be corrected in 18 minutes. Back in the lobby, Adeze bent down. Calmly, slowly, she picked up the lanyard from the floor, looped it back over her head, and straightened it against her blazer. She did not raise her voice. "What's your name?" she asked. "Why?" Greg said. "Because I'd like to know who I'm speaking to." He smirked. "Lindell. Greg Lindell. And it doesn't matter how many times you ask, you're not getting through this door without going to registration. So you can stand here all morning if you want." 16 minutes. She did not argue. She took out her phone, slowly, hands visible, the way she had learned to move around men with badges decades ago. The way her father had taught her to move, palms open, no sudden gestures. Everything narrated. "I'm taking out my phone," she said. "I'm going to make a call." "Call whoever you want." She dialed. It rang once. The person who answered was the conference's executive director, a woman named Patricia Vance, who had spent 8 months and a significant portion of her annual budget securing Dr. Okonkwo as this year's headline speaker. Patricia was backstage at that very moment, looking at her watch, wondering why her keynote, who was famously, almost compulsively early, had not yet checked in. Adais spoke quietly into the phone. "Patricia, it's Adais. I'm in the main lobby. I'm being prevented from entering the speaker area." A pause. "By security. He's thrown my badge on the floor twice now." "I'm fine. I'm just letting you know I may be a few minutes late to the stage." She listened. Then she said, "His name is Greg Lindell." And she hung up. Greg's smirk hadn't moved. He hadn't heard the other side of the call. He didn't know that Patricia Vance had gone very still backstage. He didn't know she was already walking, fast, toward the production booth. He didn't know that 14 minutes from now, 2,000 people were going to hear this story from the stage. "Friends in high places," Greg said. "Cute, doesn't change anything." "No," Adaze agreed. "It doesn't." 14 minutes. What Greg didn't understand, what he had never once in 11 years understood, was that the woman in front of him was documenting him, not arguing, not pleading, documenting. She had noted the time on her phone. She had noted his name. She had 2 witnesses with phones out and a third by the wall. In her head, with the same quiet precision she used to dismantle institutional defenses in front of congressional committees, she was counting. The first time he refused to read her credentials. That was 1. The time he physically took her property and dropped it on the floor. That was 2. The second time he did it. 3. The catering comment. 4. The instruction to use a different entrance from every other speaker. 5. She wasn't angry. People always expected her to be angry and were unsettled when she wasn't. Anger was what they knew how to handle. A calm black woman counting violations in her head with a slight, almost sad attention in her eyes that men like Greg did not know what to do with. Backstage, Patricia reached the production manager. "Hold the open," she said, "and get me the floor mic, now." 12 minutes. A second security guard wandered over, a younger man, mid-20s, name tag reading Daniel. He'd seen the standoff from across the lobby and drifted over the way people drift toward tension. He looked at Adaz. He looked at the badge around her neck. And unlike Greg, he read it. His face changed, just slightly. A flicker. "Greg," he said low. "Hey, Greg. Her badge says speaker. Anybody can print one. It's got the hologram. The real ones have the hologram. Look." He pointed, careful, not wanting to make it bigger than it was. "Greg, I think she's legit." Greg didn't even turn his head. "I've handled this kind of thing 100 times, kid. You haven't. Stand down." Daniel hesitated. This is the part that matters, so watch it closely. He saw it. He knew. The hologram was right there. The word speaker was right there. Everything in him knew that Greg was wrong and that something bad was happening. And he said quietly, the thing that people say when they know and are afraid. "Just make sure it's documented, okay? In case anybody asks." Then he stepped back. He didn't walk away entirely, but he stepped back. He let it continue. He chose his own comfort over the woman in front of him. And he would think about that choice for a long time afterward. 10 minutes. Adaze looked at Daniel, not with anger, but with something gentler and worse, a kind of recognition. She had seen 100 Daniels, the ones who knew, the ones who almost. She said nothing to him. She didn't have to. He felt it. 8 minutes. In the production booth, Patricia Vance was watching the lobby through the security feed that fed every camera in the building to a bank of monitors. She had been watching for 3 minutes. She had seen the badge on the floor. She had seen Greg's crossed arms and his smirk and his refusal. And she had made a decision that she would later describe as the easiest decision of her professional life. She turned to the production manager. "Pull up the lobby camera on the main feed, the big screen. House left." "You want the lobby on the main screen? We're about to open the..." "I want the lobby on the main screen, and I want the floor mic live in my hand in 90 seconds. 6 minutes. Greg was still talking. He'd moved on to a kind of bored lecture now, the way a man does when he believes he has already won. You know, you'd save yourself a lot of grief if you just cooperated. People like you always want to make everything a federal case. It's a security checkpoint. It's not personal. It's not personal, Adaze repeated softly. Right. You stopped me because of how I look. You threw my credentials on the floor twice because of how I look. You told me to use the catering door because of how I look. But it's not personal. Now hold on. I'm not arguing with you, Mr. Lindell. I want you to remember that. I never raised my voice. I never threatened you. I asked you to read my badge and you refused 3 separate times. I want you to remember that this was your choice. 4 minutes. Inside the auditorium, 2,000 people had taken their seats. The lights were warm. The screens on either side of the stage showed the conference logo, slowly rotating. 400,000 people watched the live stream from home, from offices, from phones. A low hum of conversation filled the hall. Then the conference logo vanished. And on the enormous screen, house left, 40 feet tall, appeared a live image of the main lobby. A security guard with his arms crossed. A black woman in a charcoal blazer standing with quiet dignity. A badge, a lanyard. The word speaker, visible even from the back row. The room went quiet in a wave, front to back, as people realized they were looking at something live. Something happening right now, just on the other side of those doors. And then Patricia Vance's voice came over the House speakers, calm and clear, and carrying to every corner of the hall and every one of those 400,000 streams. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to apologize for the delay. Our keynote speaker this morning is Dr. Adaeze Okonkwo, founding director of the Center for Institutional Accountability, 2-time witness before the United States Congress, and one of the most important voices on bias and ethics alive today. 2 minutes. Dr. Okonkwo is the entire reason we are all in this room. And right now, as you can see on the screen, she is being prevented from entering this building by a member of our security staff who has decided that she does not look like someone who belongs here. A sound moved through the auditorium. Not a gasp exactly. Something lower. Something angrier. In the lobby, Greg Lindell heard none of it. He was still standing there, arms crossed, watching the woman in front of him, certain he had handled it. The color drained from his face the moment the doors opened. They opened from the inside. Both of them, at once, pushed wide by 2 ushers, and beyond them, framed in the doorway, was the back of the stage, and past it, visible through the wings, the giant screen. With his own image on it, with her on it, with 2,000 faces turning in the same moment to look through the open doors toward the lobby where he stood. Greg's arms came uncrossed, his mouth opened. Nothing came out. Patricia Vance walked through the open doors. She did not look at Greg. She walked directly to Adaeze, and she stopped in front of her, and she said loudly enough for the microphone clipped to her lapel to carry it to every speaker in the building. Dr. Okonkwo, on behalf of this entire conference, I am so deeply sorry. Will you come in? They're waiting for you. Adaeze did not gloat. She did not look at Greg with triumph. She bent down one last time, picked up nothing. There was nothing left on the floor now. She was already wearing her badge, and simply straightened her blazer, touched her breast pocket once, where the letter was, and said, "Of course." She turned to Greg. And what she said quietly. Just to him. The microphone caught it anyway. "You should have read the badge." 4 words, that was all. You should have read the badge. The entire morning, the entire 11 years, folded down into 4 words. Then she walked past him, through the doors, onto the stage, into a standing ovation from 2,000 people who had just watched the whole thing happen. Greg stood alone in the lobby. The doors closed, and through them, muffled now, he could hear applause that was not for him, that would never be for him, thundering on the other side of a wall he would never again be allowed to cross. What happened to Greg Lindell did not happen cheaply, and it did not happen all at once. By the time Adaze finished her keynote, which she delivered without a single reference to the man in the lobby, because she was a professional, and because the talk itself was the answer, Patricia Vance had already called the head of the security contractor. By noon, Greg had been suspended. By the end of the week, the contractor, terrified of losing a client roster that included 3 Fortune 500 companies whose executives had watched the live stream, had terminated his employment. But it didn't stop there. Because the live stream had been recorded. And the clip, Greg with his arms crossed, the badge on the floor, the word speaker plainly visible, his face draining of color as the doors opened, spread across the internet within hours. Not because anyone called him a racist, no one had to. The footage simply showed what he did, and let 2.5 million people draw the obvious conclusion. The regional manager who had closed 9 complaints against Greg with the words, "No violation," found those 9 files reopened by his own corporate office, which had suddenly become extremely interested in its own liability. The vendor who'd been stopped 4 times in one day was contacted. The electrician was contacted. The girl in the hijab, now a college sophomore, was contacted. The manager who'd protected Greg for 11 years cleaned out his own office 3 weeks later. No ceremony, no farewell email, just a cardboard box in a parking lot. And Daniel, the young guard who had seen the hologram, who had said, "I think she's legit," who had then stepped back, Daniel was not fired. He had, after all, been the only one to read the badge. But he could not stop thinking about the part where he stepped back, about the gap between knowing and doing. A month later, he enrolled, on his own and at his own expense, in a bias response certification program for security professionals. On the first day, the instructor asked everyone why they'd come. Most people gave careful, professional answers. Daniel said, "Because I watched something wrong happen 10 feet in front of me, and I knew it was wrong. And I told the woman to make sure it was documented instead of opening the door. I never want to be that person again." Dr. Okonkwo learned about all of it secondhand, weeks later, from Patricia. She had one chance to say something to a room about what had happened, and she'd already used it. Because the keynote she delivered that morning, the one she gave 12 minutes after a man threw her credentials on the floor, was about exactly this. She stood in front of 2,000 people and 400,000 more, and she did not mention Greg Lindell by name. She didn't need to. She said this instead near the end, and it is the part of the talk that traveled furthest. This morning, before I walked onto this stage, someone decided I did not belong here. They did not check. They did not ask. They looked at me, and they knew, the way bias always knows, instantly, without evidence, with total confidence. And I want to be very clear about something. I had a badge, I had a title, I had an entire conference behind me and my name on the banner above the door. Most people who are stopped the way I was stopped this morning have none of those things. They have no executive director watching a camera feed. They have no 2,000 witnesses. They have no microphone. They are simply turned away and told to use the other door, and they go home, and nothing is recorded, and no one ever knows. I was able to walk through that door. The tragedy is how many people who look like me cannot. And the work, my work, your work, the work of everyone in this room, is to build institutions where dignity does not depend on having the right credentials in your pocket. where the snap judgment has no power, where you do not have to be the keynote speaker to be allowed through the door. The room was silent. And then it was not. Someone asked her afterward, in the hallway, the question people always asked. Why didn't you just make him call his supervisor? Why didn't you tell him right away exactly who you were and what you'd do to him? You could have ended it in 30 seconds. She thought about it. Then she said, because the next person he stopped wasn't going to be a keynote speaker. If the only people who get treated with dignity are the ones who can prove they're important enough to deserve it, then we haven't fixed anything. I didn't want him to learn to fear titles. I wanted the system around him to learn it could no longer protect him. Those are different lessons. She flew home that evening. First class, the way they'd brought her in. She watched the clouds out the window, and she did not feel triumphant. She felt tired. She felt the particular tiredness of having won something small inside, something enormous. When she landed, her wife was waiting at the curb, a federal appellate attorney named Joy, who had read about the whole thing on her phone hours before Daisy had a chance to tell her. Joy didn't say anything dramatic. She just took Daisy's bag and put it in the trunk, and as they pulled away from the airport into the evening traffic, she reached over and held her hand. You okay? Joy asked. I'm okay. You touched your pocket on the screen. I saw you touch your pocket before you walked in. Adais looked out the window. The letter was still there. They will try to make you small. Do not help them. I did, she said. They drove a while in the quiet. It won't be the last time, Joy said, not a question. Just the truth. Said plainly, the way you say a thing you've both said before and will say again. No, Daisy said. It won't. She looked at the road ahead, at the headlights coming on as the sky went dark, at a world that was, tonight, very slightly better than it had been that morning, and nowhere near finished. So someone has to keep walking up to the door, she said quietly, and someone has to keep opening it. And the car drove on into the evening, two women holding hands, the letter in her pocket, the work still waiting in the morning. If this story made you feel something, anger or recognition, or the quiet ache of having been turned away from a door you had every right to walk through, then share it with someone who needs to hear it. Not because of the views, because stories like Adiz's only matter if they travel, and they only travel if we carry them. And before you go, tell me this in the comments, because I read them, and I want to know. Have you ever stood in front of a closed door that should have been open, stopped, doubted, told to use the other entrance? And what did you do? What did it cost you? Your story matters here. Say it out loud. Subscribe if you believe dignity shouldn't require a badge to prove it. Because every story we tell together is a refusal to let the snap judgment have the final word.